Like a backstage pass to the world of fly fishing travel, this is Waypoints, the podcast of destination angling. News and events, helpful travel tips, destination profiles, great stories, and expert advice from some of the most seasoned and experienced names in fishing travel. Waypoints is brought to you by Yellow Dog Fly Fishing Adventures, the industry's #1 specialty travel company for the very best insider knowledge, logistical support, and trip preparation. Freshwater or saltwater, international or domestic, Yellow Dog has you covered for your next fishing adventure. And now, your Waypoints host, Yellow Dog founder and director, Jim Klug.
If you've recently picked up a fly fishing magazine or surfed popular fishing accounts on social media, chances are good you've seen a long-haired, flat-billed wearing angler named Jesse Colten, a regular face in ads for Howler Brothers, Bahio Sunglasses, and of course his own business venture, Xcalak Lodge. Jesse is a career fly fishing guide from the Rockies who originally got his start in Colorado's Vail Valley. After falling in love with both the fishing and the culture of Xcalak, a small fishing village in the far southern reaches of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, he purchased an existing hotel and opened Xcalak Lodge, an operation that has very quickly gained a reputation as one of the hottest and most productive permit destinations in the Caribbean. For this two-part episode of Waypoints, we're actually on location and recording here at Xcalak, sitting down with Jesse during our visit to Xcalak while hosting a group of anglers. In part 2 of this episode, we'll actually be talking with some of those anglers who will share their accounts and opinions of the fishery, the lodge, and the program that Jesse has created. But first, we're sitting here overlooking the beach. Jesse, thanks so much for joining me today and for having me back down. I appreciate it.
Jim, always good to see you, man. Great to have you back in Xcalak. Man, it's been a little bit less than a year since last spring's visit, and it's just awesome to have you back down, man.
Well, I got to describe to our viewers a little bit what we're seeing. We're literally overlooking the beach, overlooking the flats. The wind's blowing just the perfect amount for permit fishing conditions.
Juicy.
We literally stepped out of the skiff about 10 minutes ago, and here we are recording, and we're going to talk about it.
You guys saw some fish today too, right?
We saw a lot of fish, a lot of big fish.
It's windy, but not unmanageable wind, and that's kind of what we want, right? It's blowing in fresh sargasso. Sometimes people are bummed about the sargasso, but the permit love it. They're into it. But yeah, man, you can't beat this scene. We got the Mesoamerican Reef right at our back, and it's a good time to have a chat about some fishing, no doubt.
Well, I've got a lot I want to talk to you about, and that's why we're doing a two-part episode, so we don't have to rush through things. But, I've always thought since we first met that you're kind of like that old Buffett song, Cowboy in the Jungle, where, one day you're guiding anglers in the Colorado Rockies, and next you're fishing the flats of Xcalak and Chetumal Bay and living down here.
Crazy.
It's quite an adventure.
Crazy. I sitting back, looking at it now, I can't believe it happened. I mean, it was this thing where it felt like a dogfight for the first couple years, running through quicksand to try to make it happen. But as I'm sitting here now, looking back on 4 years of business, it's like it happened in the blink of an eye. And I couldn't be luckier, couldn't be happier to be sitting here now, for sure.
Well, it's a pretty killer setting. There's no doubt about it. I got to ask you, your original start in fly fishing. How did you kind of find your way into the world as a young man? Who introduced you to the sport? How did it all begin for Jesse Colten?
If I can remember, I think the first time I ever heard about fly fishing, I was 13. I was in 7th grade at junior high down in Colorado Springs, Colorado. My best friend kind of dragged me to this fly tying club that they had started at the school. And I hadn't even fished. I never had a fly rod, but they threw a little hook in a vise and were telling me to wrap up this San Juan worm, and I just thought it was the most monotonous, boring activity I had done at 13. But eventually, once they got me out and we went on our first couple trips up to 11 Mile Canyon, I really realized what it was. And it was years and years actually after that I really got into the sport. It was because, I got back into sports and all that stuff you get into in high school. And then it was after high school that I really started, kind of hammering the rivers in Colorado.
Well, you're an interesting guy, and for those that don't know your background, I mean, you're an angler, you're a hell of a musician, you're now a filmmaker, you're into backcountry snow sports, world travel. I mean, you've done a lot at a pretty young age and seen a lot of places.
I think for me, just as an individual, when I got out of high school, I had an opportunity to go play some lacrosse in college, and even though I wanted to be at that point, I wanted to move up to the mountains. I wanted to be a ski bum. I wanted to fish. But my folks really talked me into doing 1 year of school, which was great for me. And then after that, I moved up to the mountains and really focused my time on the outdoors. And I think being young and being 19 and having that available time to work and travel and see what I like panned out really well for me. Not trying to knock college out there for folks, but for me, it really gave me an opportunity at a young age to start seeing some stuff.
That's right, kids. Stay in school.
Stay in school. I'm not telling you to drop out. I'm just saying I wasn't good enough at school to stay in it anyways, so it ended up working out great.
Well, how did you find your way down here to Xcalak? I mean, it's a long ways from the Vail Valley.
Yeah, I will say one piece of advice to young anglers is if you're working at a fly shop or you're a young guide, like listen to those older guides. Because I had one, me and my best friend started guiding together. The same guy, Chad Sperry, that dragged me to Fly Tying Club. We were guiding together up in Vail, and we had this mentor guide, still our mentor guide. We call him Dad. His name's Ryan Schmidt, and he just kept on us. Like, you got to get in to saltwater fly fishing. Got to get into it. And at that time, Chad and I were just going on surf trips every chance we could get. We'd go to Costa Rica, Pacific side, Nicaragua, Santa Teresa, and chase surf. And sure, we'd bang a fly or two into the surf, and you'd come up with a snook here or there, but we weren't doing flats. And that guide, Ryan Schmidt, eventually talked us into it and brought us down to Xcalak. And then we saw a couple other fisheries. But I remember that original time, that first time I was in Xcalak, it just blew my mind. I mean, it going from the rivers to being on the flats and seeing permit all over, covered up in them. That first trip, I think I saw more permit than I've seen maybe in my life. I mean, it was crazy.
Well, I mean, this is a little bit off the grid, and we're going to talk a little bit more about where it is here in a second. But that was your first trip to the flats, was Xcalak, or you had been to some other places?
No, the first trip in the flats I ever went to was here.
And you knew this was the place?
I didn't at the time, but afterwards, looking back, yeah, it always stuck with me after that, for sure. And, I think at the time, I was 5-6 years into guiding freshwater at that point and was starting to look around the corner a bit to think like, okay, is there an opportunity in fly fishing for me to do something a little bigger? And then as it circled around, it turned out that this was it.
Well, let's have a little bit of a rundown on where we are in Xcalak. And I think a lot of people have heard of it. They know it's kind of on the radar as far as a pretty hot destination right now. They're seeing a lot of pictures. They're seeing videos and posts about this part of the southern Yucatan. But give us a little rundown on kind of where we are and what makes this place unique, kind of the area, the fishery, and also the town and the community of Xcalak. Give us a little background.
Xcalak's just an amazingly interesting, unique place, in my opinion, and I think in most of the opinions that make it down here. It's as far south as you can go on the Yucatan and still be in Mexico. I mean, a 7-kilometer swim and you're in the Bacalar Chico River, which separates Ambergris Caye, Belize from Mexico. And it's just a majestic, as you've seen a bunch of times here, it's really a beautiful fishery, and the village has stayed really small. I mean, it's at 350, maybe 400 now, which is pretty shocking given it's, on a border. And it has just a great access to Chetumal Bay, and it has really good access to the Mesoamerican Reef and all that. But because of a big hurricane you can read about back in the 50s, they originally were going to have the capital of Quintana Roo be here. There's 3 states in the Yucatan. There's the state of Campeche, Yucatan, and Quintana Roo. And back in the 50s, Xcalak was growing. I think they had a sugar plant here, and they had maybe 800, 900 people, and then a huge Cat 5 hurricane hit. I think Hurricane Janet, if I remember right.
Yeah, Janet in 55.
Right, 55.
Yeah.
I don't think they had the term rapid intensifier back then, but it hit at like 3 in the morning. There's a few guys in town that survived it and were kids and remember it. But after that, they moved the capital across the bay.
And it kind of set the town back for decades. I mean, it killed a lot of people and just devastated the momentum that the town had and knocked it back to this kind of quiet, tiny fishing village. A lot of people after the storm left. And for the next several decades, it just remained completely off the grid.
It was, the amount of influence, like a damming a river. You know what I mean? Xcalak was on track to be something, and that hurricane completely stopped it. And I think for an angler, it stopped it in a good way. I mean, sad and unfortunate that people lost their lives and all these things. But, the capital of Quintana Roo now is Chetumal, and there's 150,000 people there.
It could have been here.
Could have been here.
That's crazy
Could
to
have
think
been
about.
here, right?
Jeez.
And instead, the people are far outnumbered by dogs and permit, and that's the way that I like it. But, hopefully it stays like that for a little while.
Well, in 1980, after kind of being completely untouched and unknown, They built a gravel road that kind of established a land route between Xcalak and kind of the rest of the state. So it opened it up a bit. But what it also did in the late 80s, it saw the opening of the first fishing lodge down here.
That's right.
Costa de Cocos.
Yeah, Dave and Lana.
Yeah, pretty storied operation. They've been here a lot of years.
For sure. And they really, them and a guy, Mark Cowan, brought fly fishing here, and really a lot of the guides I work with today have Costa de Cocos, and I have Costa de Cocos to thank for training just an unbelievable guide pool over the course of a couple decades.
Yeah, and a lot of fly fishing history down there. And one of my favorite things about coming down here is some people may think of it as a somewhat new fishing destination, which A, is not the case, but B, you've got guides in this community that have been working now for decades that are, total pros, year-round guides that really know their craft exceptionally well. 100%.
I think as I got into a business mindset and somewhere also that I wanted to live, one of the big reasons I wanted to start a business in Xcalak and move here was that there was this amazing guide pool already here. And particularly that they were local. They didn't have to be brought in from another town, from another state in Mexico. They're local, Xcalak-born pros. And, we're training some new ones now, and there's some young guys that are getting even fishier in terms of tying flies and think about fly presentation. But our vet guys, our veterans, they're 25, 24 years in, 18 years in, and they know these flats like the back of their hands. It's unbelievable.
Well, it shows when you go out and fish with them.
Totally.
It's unbelievable. These guys are total pros. So here you are, a little more than 4 years into owning X Flats Lodge. It's the dream job, right? Owning a fishing lodge in the Caribbean, nonstop fun, everything always runs smooth, never any challenges.
Man, I wish that was just even a smudge into the truth. There are days where there's multiple days, and there's a point in every day where I take a look around and I'm like, how did this happen to me? This is unbelievable. The rest of that day is filled with what I'm sure you've experienced. Just leaning into it and trying to, there's a lot of working in a foreign country. There's a ton of red tape and a ton of hurdles, ton of topes, which is an old Mexican joke. Because have you ever hit any of those speed bumps outside of town? Topes are just these bizarre speed bumps they put outside of Mexican towns down here in the Yucatan. You'll hit them at night going 70 miles an hour.
And sometimes it's like a piece of rope that's
yeah,
stretched
rope
over there,
is,
like 6-inch diameter rope and different kinds of stones. It's, yeah.
And the reason we call them topes is they're unexpected, right? So, working down here is beautiful, and the people are wonderful. It's hard at times, for sure, but it's worth it.
Yeah, well, and here you are in the beginning. You buy it, you get your guide team together, things are going well, you're putting a ton of blood, sweat, and tears into this. You get the lodge up and running, things are starting to gain some momentum, and then the world shuts down.
Yeah. Man, it was, I was here. Obviously, and we were kind of in that second full year of business. Really our third, but really our second of like a full season, working all the kinks out, doing everything, and we were pumped. As I think I mentioned to you when we talked last time, I think COVID ended up actually being a positive thing for this business. Apart from that, cash flow wise, as a second year business, it was almost a kill shot. But having said that, it also, since we were the first to reopen, we reopened, I think, in November of 20. Is that right?
Yeah, and Mexico and the Yucatan, in that sense, bounced back faster than anywhere else.
For sure.
And you guys were pretty much the first country to reopen and welcome back travelers and anglers.
Absolutely, and then you had anglers chomping at the bit, ready to go, and you knew I was chomping at the bit, ready, and our guides were ready. So I think actually COVID gave people a second look at Mexico. I think sometimes Mexico gets overlooked as an exotic fishing destination just purely based on its namesake, maybe a little bit. People hear the name Mexico and they think of Cabo San Lucas, Playa del Carmen, Señor Frogs, all these things. But really, Mexico's a huge country, massive, and it really is home to some of the best fishing waters and some of the more beautiful, rich, historical locations in the world. And some of these guys that had overlooked it because they wanted to fish so bad came down here, some of these groups, and I think they're Mexico anglers for life now.
We heard that from anglers all the time. They're like, man, I hadn't been to the Yucatan in 15, 20 years.
Right.
I forgot how good it was.
Right.
And I want to talk more about this later in this episode and in part two, but specifically the permit fishing has been off the hook lately. It's one of those few places. I was fishing with a buddy today, and he asked me, he's like, do you work in places where you've actually seen the fishing get better over the years? And this is one area where I would say a resounding yes to that.
It's improving. Size of fish, for sure. And I also think our techniques of how we're trying to fish them are improving. One of the attractive things about permit fishing to me is that the recipe, even though it's been developed by some amazing guys over the course of decades, the recipe's not set in stone. It's not carved. When I showed up to guide as a freshwater guide floating the Colorado and the Eagle River in Vail Valley, I had guys that laid out the recipe for me. They said temperature-wise, time of year, look under a rock. They show you all the things you need to know because it's been semi-figured out. There's things to discover on it, but not a lot. Really following that smart path is the way to be a productive trout fisherman. I think in permit, there's just so much still we don't understand about the food and about the way that the food is there and the way it's being presented to the fish and all that. So I think over the last 4 years, I think our guides and us as a team are working to figure out how to create more hookups per cast. More hookups per successful shot, I would say.
It's constantly evolving.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes it so exciting.
Makes it fun.
Well, one of the things that I really love about the X-Flats kind of mindset and philosophy that you've created, Jesse, it's your connection and commitment to the local community and the families that actually live down here. And again, as you said, it's 350, 400 people. It's not large. But for you, and this is something that I really identified early on in the way that you run your business, it's not just about, okay, we got the fishing guides, we got the lodge staff, and we're doing our thing. You're have very much been about kind of the overall Xcalak community. Let's talk a little bit about that and your philosophies on that connection.
Absolutely. I think with a place like Xcalak, it's small and the fishery is big if the weather is good. And if the weather is bad, the fishery is small, like a lot of places, because it centers you down. And the reason I bring that up is it's really every fishery I've been to, including this one, is fragile. You need people to protect it. And the people that are going to protect it, that are going to be cutting gill nets out of the water, that are going to be looking for poachers and are going to be helping this fishery are the local people and are the guides. So if you don't aim your business at supporting them with this business from the get-go, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. And apart from that, apart from the business side of it, on the heart side of things, these people are great. And I wanted to be a part of that. I didn't want to be someone that was here to just juice the lemon and head back home and kick my feet up. I wanted to be someone that they knew. And so that was, I put my head into a book and learned Spanish as good as I could. The first couple years I was here, and I'm still learning, but that was a big step in that. And then also making, not a rule, but making a mental commitment to only employing people from Xcalak. Particularly our guides and obviously our whole wait staff and lodge staff are all Xcalak born, and they're wonderful people.
Well, you see it. You walk through the village with you, and you know everybody. People are happy to see you.
Yeah, most of the time.
And most of the time. And I could tell by your guide team, the assistant guides, the lodge staff, people really appreciate that. They think a lot of that.
The energy's great too, right? Like look, the dock this morning. One of my favorite guides, Pio, comes in. He's blowing on the conch shell. Everybody's jawing at each other. That's the kind of environment I like to be in. And I think the more I push that energy, the better the fishing gets. I don't know how to explain it. I think when it doesn't get stagnant, and when it doesn't get stale and doesn't get stiff, and everybody's having fun, I think the fishing's better. It's more productive.
Well, talk to me a little bit about how, looking back over the last 4+ years, that kind of commitment to the community, that connection has helped you build your business down here. I mean, has it fast-forwarded things? Has it made things easier? I mean, what have you learned from that?
I think the connection to the community has built trust that you can't buy. They've seen business owners before. They know what business owners look like and what we're here to do. Mexican nationals are not strange to the concept of people coming from the States or Canada or wherever else in a fruitful, rich fishery and trying to make money there. And I think that's kind of what they expect when they see you hit the shores, so to speak. It takes a long, slow, patient route to convince them that you're something different. And the way that you do that is by mutual respect, being really fair with the way that you treat them financially and emotionally and all of those things, and the way that you connect with their families. And it really is just making an effort. So it didn't happen overnight, but looking back 4 years now, I'm glad I didn't do it any other way. These guys have my back, and I have theirs, and that's the way it's got to be.
And you built a hell of a lodge down here. You know, when
Thanks,
we
man.
talk about the lodge and when we're selling the lodge, you know, it's not overly fancy. You're not getting a mint on the pillow.
Yeah.
It's as I describe it, you know, it's a fishing lodge that's run by serious anglers for anglers. And if you know, you come down, you're immediately going to feel at home. You're going to feel that everybody here is excited to see you, which is great. And it's got one of the coolest fishing vibes I've ever seen of any lodge around the world. It's amazing.
Thanks, Jim. That's awesome to hear. That's what we aim for. You know, I would say that at the beginning, in the first couple of years, especially because I was a little younger, you know, remember when I started this business, I was 27. And so I also look young. I think I look young, maybe not anymore, but it's aged me a bit. But I was a little self-conscious at the beginning of like people coming down and expecting everything to be the way that I saw fishing lodges at the time. So it was very top button, and, you know, I was trying to be something essentially that we're not. What we are at the X Flats is we strive for quality always, quality in our guides, quality in the food, quality in everything. But we have our own vibe, as you mentioned, you know, and once I started understanding that just being who I am, both in myself and in the reflection of the lodge, people wanted to get on board of something different a little bit. And as opposed to trying to be in something that I thought I was supposed to be, being myself and having the lodge be a reflection of that was a great experience for people. And it makes me do my job better because I'm being authentic.
Well, and you got a staff that's incredibly dedicated.
For sure.
And that, as you said a moment ago, like everybody here is buying into that energy, and it shows. It's pretty cool. We're having a great time always.
Oh, man, we are. There's no shortage of good times here at the X Flats, that's for sure. And I've seen you and your friends kick your heels up pretty good. And you know, we're here to fish, and we take that really seriously. But we're also here to just enjoy the fact that, I mean, especially after COVID, right? I feel like the enjoyment factor has gone through the roof since COVID because we're so happy to be back.
The appreciation factor
For sure.
is off the charts. And,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, there's less moaning and whining about the wind and about those kind of things. People are just happy to be on the beach, kicking their feet up, regardless of the weather. If the fishing's great, obviously it's a huge bonus.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about this fishery, this kind of Xcalak area, Chetumal Bay fishery,
Sure.
The area that surrounds the lodge. How would you describe it to people that haven't been here?
Sure. I think it's unique in the sense that we're very much a dual fishery. So, like, there's a lot of places I've been where it's a bay, you know, or where it's an ocean, or lagoon fishery, baby tarpon fishery, that kind of stuff. We really have two fisheries that are right here, right on our front doorstep. We have a backyard and a front yard. And the backyard is Mr. Dependable Chetumal Bay. It's a short run from the lodge beach, maybe 15, 20 minutes if the wind's big, on 20 on the big side. But and that has a bunch of area, really good bone fishing, really good permit fishing, and protection from the wind. What I think separates us, that makes us a little more dangerous, is in really good weather, our front side fishery is amazing because there's so little development on the beach side, and the protection from the Mesoamerican reef here is really strong. There's not many cuts in our reef. It's a really thick wall, and you can see it right from the beach right there. The waves are breaking over it, and it just seals in this beautiful oceanside flat. And we've got, 17, 18 kilometers of really good water on the ocean side to fish. And I think that paired with the bay and with a handful of lagoons with baby tarpon, it's a diverse fishery.
Oh, it's huge, too.
It's big.
Talk a little bit about the species. We've obviously mentioned permit several times already.
Sure.
You just talked about baby tarpon. Tell me what people can find down here. And obviously that changes a little bit with the season and with the conditions, but tell us a little bit about the species.
I think one of the fun things since I've been down here is, it's like you said a minute ago, you don't know what you're going to see. There's wacky stuff that happens all the time, but primarily, first and foremost, we're a permit and a bone fishery. I think there's some bonefish here that are not Mexican-sized bonefish. Like, you'll see some big bones in Xcalak if you go looking for them. Outside that 2 to 4 pound that is the normal Mexican bonefish, you'll see some bigger ones here if you really go looking. But a lot of people come down here for permit. In the summertime months, starting about now, April, May, June, July, August, we start to see those. You saw some big tarpon the other day, right? The big ones are coming in.
Yeah, the big girls are starting to show up.
Which is perfect. We're always excited when they show up in town. They're not here year round. We do have lagoons packed full of little 5-pounders Depending on rains, it can be really good with baby tarpon. But the big girls show up anywhere from late March to mid-April and stay here pretty active and pretty consistently through August, September. And then once we start to get the heavy rain of late summer, fall, that's when we start to see the big snook fishery come in. And that's hit or miss. It's really rain dependent because, if you go into the back bay and you fly a drone up around all those mangrove islands you see back there, what you'll see from the drone is that each piece of dry land has a lagoon on it. I mean, it's mostly water down here. It's unbelievable. We're barely on a strip of land here. So that water, those lagoons are home to all these big snook. When it rains really heavy, like abnormally heavy, like it did 2 years ago when we went through the whole Greek alphabet of, tropical storms, those snook get cold in there. That fresh water fills up the lagoon too much and they don't like it, and they exit and they come out onto the bonefish flats. And so 2 falls ago, we had just an epic snook fishery for a month or two where the snook were in really shallow water, hanging under the mangroves. And that was one of my favorite things. This last fall, we didn't have that rain, so it was a shorter season for it. So you never know what you're going to get there,
Huge diversity of species, though.
Unbelievable. I mean, there was a guy 2 weeks ago that came back with like a 45-pound cobia in the flats. And, I got one other session maybe 3 years ago where there was some cobia around, and all of a sudden they're showing back up. The ocean is just this bizarre, wild, super, super wild land, and anything can come in from the deep water and decide that it wants to be in the flats for a little bit, which is what keeps it so interesting for me year after year. As soon as I think I've got something figured out, something completely different happens.
Yeah, obviously a big focus on permit. You've got the tarpon, both resident, kind of small baby tarpon. You've got the big migratory fish that come through.
Right.
Bonefish of all different sizes, snook, cuda, jacks. I mean, we've seen more jacks this week than I think I've ever seen
Jack
down
crevalles, man. Where can we go back in time and make Jack crevalles cool? Like, what went wrong with that?
I don't know. They certainly deserve it.
They're the best fish out there.
Yeah.
The eat is unbelievable. They come at you in a school of 15, angry, swimming fast in clear water. They fight over your fly. They'll eat poppers, and then they fight harder than anything else. And somewhere in history, I wish we could go back in time, because somewhere in history we decided to marginalize these Jack crevalles. It's just crazy.
Big mistake.
Huge mistake.
Yeah, that should change. We're going to start that right now.
I'm a Jack crevalle fisherman from here on out. That's all I'm doing.
I'm in. Well, talk to me a little bit about kind of the characteristics. Obviously, we talked about the different species. We talked about the ocean side and the bay. But the characteristics of the flats down here. I mean, you got a little bit of everything, right?
Absolutely. Bay, you're looking at mostly white and tan sand. Essentially coralless. So, when you hook some of these bigger fish, you're a little less concerned. They can really rip out into the open bay. Mangroves, really walkable sand. So, like, one of the things we do a lot here is if you see a school of big fish and they're semi-stationary, you'll jump out of the boat. That's the bay. And when you jump out of the boat, I feel like your chances go up. That's just me. You get closer. They don't know you're there. The ocean side, in contrast to that, is thick in turtle grass, which I love to fish in. And for most anglers, it's harder to see the fish in that. It's harder to pick them out at first. The tail is different. The way the color bounces off the bottom is just different. So the ocean side is real thick with turtle grass. It has a lot of coral heads. The big fish you hook on the ocean side, you're nervous. You're scared. Guide's going to stay on the motor so you can essentially walk that fish like you're walking a dog in the park around these coral heads. So it's diverse. The contrast from the front to the back is drastic, I'd say.
Well, talk to us a little bit about a typical fishing day. If you come down and you spend a week at X Flats, you're a client, talk to us about the fishing day, how it starts, kind of what the day might include, basically what anglers can expect.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is up to you as the angler. There are guys that come down here that are determined to catch their first permit. And as a lot of permit anglers know, if you want to do that, you got to dedicate the time. You got to be willing to not use that reel once until the last day, where you use it once and you catch your permit. For other people, it's a mixture. They want to get that rod bent. They want to hear that reel going. And so if that's what you're going to do, you get up here, you grab a coffee, grab some breakfast, you're right on the beach, you practice your cast a little on the dock, and then you leave the dock at 8 a.m. usually. Run down about 15 minutes until you get to the Zaragoza Canal, which is a man-made canal they made to enter Chetumal Bay. About a kilometer south of that is the Bacalar Chico that separates Belize and Mexico. But you'll cruise through there, and there's a bunch of little techie, little small, skinny bonefish waters you can get into. A lot of people like to get out of the boat and walk with their guides. That's what I recommend, especially first timers. Get out of the boat, and a lot of these guys have never felt what it's like to be in 75, 80-degree water, walking through white sand flats as schools of bonefish are coming at them. You'll do that. You'll have a little lunch out on the water. It's usually tacos or empanadas or chilaquiles, something. We do a lot of like Mexican cuisine, as you've seen down here. But and then fish in the afternoon till about 4 p.m. The fishing day's 8 hours, and then they're back at the X Flats dock having margaritas and eating more tacos and playing some cornhole.
Yeah, it's a pretty good post-fishing scene. There's no doubt about it.
I think that's the funnest part usually, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys also have a really cool boat setup down here. So you guys aren't fishing the same small skiffs like dolphins that other lodges in the area and in the region sometimes use. You guys are out of the Pongas.
Yep.
And you also utilize a two-guide system. Talk to us about that. This is amazing.
The two-guide system, I had seen done in a couple small examples at other lodges, and I think the thing that it first screamed out to me as a benefit in the two-guide system was, hey, there's 8 more guys and 8 more families that we can employ if we implement a two-guide system. I mean, these fly fishing guides in a lot of these communities are financially the most successful people in town. And we like to use the term, we joke, spread the bread. And spread the bread just means make sure that this fly fishing money can infiltrate and be positive in town in any way that it can be. So step one is it brings 8 more guys to the dock every single day. So instead of 8, we got 16. As far as a fishing benefit, it really comes down to what can go wrong. It's another pair of eyes, first off, spotting the fish. And then also, one of the major things that goes wrong when you hook a permit or hook a big fish is line maintenance. So guide number 2 is there to make sure that nothing goes wrong, whether it's your drag's messed up or there's a knot in your fly line or there's a knot in your backing or something. They're there to help. And I think that if everybody's on board together working is when the magic happens for sure.
Well, it's incredible because you have 2 sets of eyes. Oftentimes, as you mentioned a minute ago, you might spot some fish. One angler hops out with the guide. The other angler may still be in the boat. Well, there's still a second guide in there. So, I mean, oftentimes you both have something going on, and you have a guide with each angler. That's pretty cool.
For sure. Nobody's ever on the bench. I mean, we get out of the boat so much for permit in the bay that when that happens, I always tell our anglers, like, if you're the guy not up, if you're the guy not getting in the water, as soon as your buddy gets in the water to go chase those fish, get your rod ready because life breeds life, and when you're in fish, you're in them. That's my experience, at least. When there's permit, jack, bonefish, snapper around, when you start to see life, you're going to see more of it because obviously there's some sort of food source hatching or doing something there that's creating some feeding. So there's been tons of times where a permit story will start where someone gets out of the boat with guide A to go chase a school of fish. They get 60, 80 yards away from the boat. Guide B will spot another school of fish and start pulling that boat over there. And then there you go. Guide B and angler B hook up on a fish when it wasn't even his turn on the bow. So we're all about it. We've committed to it for sure, and I think we'll stick with it for the long haul.
Well, clients love it. I mean, it's absolutely a game changer, I think, for most people. Whereas a lot of times when you're fishing out of a skiff, fishing out of a ponga, there's always somebody riding the pine, right? You're waiting for your turn. And this two-guide system doesn't totally eliminate that, but it cuts it way back.
It does, for sure, especially for bone fishing, too. I mean, I think there's an example in flats fishing, too, where it even exists in the group we have here now, where maybe there's one angler that's on his 5th or 6th trip on the salt. He's been practicing his double haul. He's been tying flies. He's like mentally engaged to wanting to fish permit. And his buddy that he convinced to come down has never even held an 8-weight, never even held a 9-weight. And for that example, a lot of times we'll have the captain, guide A, drop off guide B and the bonefish angler on a bonefish flat, and then he'll go pull a permit flat with the other angler. So, the goal is that people are coming down here a long ways. We really appreciate it. We want everybody's fishing as much as we can.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, this area is always, I think, been known by those in the know and kind of some small circles, even for the last 10, 20 plus years, as a super legit permit destination. But lately, things have kind of exploded down here. I mean, both with regard to the attention that the area is receiving, but also with some amazing, super legit numbers of fish that are being caught on a regular basis. And what is it about this place that, in your opinion, makes the permit fishing so consistently good? And why are we seeing so many big permit down here these days?
I have been going over my own information trying to figure that out. So as a uneducated scientist of permit fishing, I keep a permit journal. I only record hookups because it's basically impossible to learn from failures. But even if I lose the fish, I record what happened. If I feed a fish successfully and get him to the reel, I record about it. And if I have guys that I really trust in their stories, I'll record their information as well. We are catching bigger fish. We are catching more fish. And I think there are some things changing. I think really what it is for the most part is that we're really dedicated to trying to figure it out, especially on what to throw at them and how to throw it and how to present it. And there are certainly times where we go into the bay and there's schools of tailing fish and we'll throw the kitchen sink at them and pull everything by them and nothing. I'll give you one story, and I'll probably regret telling it to you for everybody that listened to it, but just in case it blows up in a couple years, this is something that happened to us one time. A guide and I were out on a changeover day. So we go out into the bay, and we're doing a little fishing, and we see these schools of tail and permit packed really tightly. 2 schools, maybe 15 to 20 fish each, and they're packed really tightly. And we're seeing them flash too, which is a bit uncommon, I'd say, for the permit that we see. We're used to seeing bonefish flash, and flash in the sense where they're turning to eat something. You're seeing their bodies. And so these 2 schools are just eating, flashing, and we're throwing the kitchen sink at them. I mean, every permit fly we had, of every color, of every size, then to bonefish flies, then to snook flies, tarpon flies, anything we could throw, they wanted none of it. We made the decision, for once, let's spook these fish off and see if we can figure out what this food source is. Slap on the snorkel mask, go figure it out, take our T-shirts and try to strain through some water. Of course, we were just massively unsuccessful because the reason that this is hard is we can't identify the food source most of the time. We're guessing. At a river, you can walk up, you can overturn a rock. The food source is hitting you in the face when there's a good hatch going. And in the flats, it's just not. They're predatory, they're prey species. It's little crabs, little shrimp, and they're hard to find and they're hard to see. But we get back in the boat afterwards and we look down at our legs. We're covered in sea lice. Covered up. Little skittle-sized sea lice. And Eric, one of my guides, and I, we kind of look at each other. We laugh a little bit. And it was clear as day to us that that's what they were eating at that time. We went back and tried some, first-generation sea lice flies that we tied. And were marginally unsuccessful until a couple months later we saw a school of fish doing the same thing. Really tightly packed. Not like, the normal permit school where there's maybe 18, 20 inches in between each fish and they're swimming around hunting. These guys almost looked like they were daisy chaining, like tarpon. And we went to the sea lice fly and we hooked up 2 of them, and real quick lost both of them. The hooks that we had tied them on, I think, were too small because we weren't able to keep them on. They were big fish. But little things like that, I think, of continuing to just kind of try to explore and discover is helping us catch more fish.
It's that evolution.
Evolution, yeah.
Never ends.
If you figure out the food source and what's going on with the food, you're going to figure out how to catch the fish, no matter what fish we're talking about, right? That's the game. And that's a particularly difficult game in a flats environment with a fish that is very specific about what it wants to eat.
We talk a lot about we still got dogs barking, which is awesome. But I love that on the show because we're literally sitting on the beach right here. We got dogs running through and motors coming by and the wind's blowing.
Our dogs are full-time security team. They never stop.
It's perfect, though, because this is the beauty of recording on location. But, in talking about permit and kind of figuring out that feeding behavior, we talk a lot about permit on this show. There's this consensus out there in the fly fishing world. I think that they're just these, black-tailed devils that are, just so difficult to catch. And largely they are until they want to eat. And there are times when they switch on and all of a sudden permit become not that hard.
It could be the easiest thing ever. It's bizarre. I mean, that's the luck of the angler is really, when you come and what kind of fish you're casting to. It can be the best caster in the world, the best fly tire in the world. And if you're casting to fish that are particularly not down to eat, then it's not going to happen. One of the things that I feel like I've changed my opinion on in regards to permit is when you hear about a permit destination, you'll hear, oh, there's resident bonefish and permit there. I think the latter is not true. I think our permit, and I think most permit, are nomadic to some extent. I mean, there are schools of permit that you'll see on a flat here, and they'll stay for a week, 10 days, and then they'll move on. And there's times over the last 4 years here where we're covered up in permit, and they're everywhere, and you can sort of identify that it's just that they're just here and they're eating. And then there's times that there's less. And there's schools of 30 or 40 that you'll see in an area every day for a week or two, and then they'll move on. So I think a lot of that has to do with when these nomadic schools of permit move through the area. If you catch them at the beginning, they're really happy, and they're really, 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 excited to eat. They're on a new location that they like, that is, fruitful of food, obviously. That's why permit come here. There must be really a lot of food here. And then after a while, they get used to it, and then they move on. And then more schools come in. So I'm kind of the belief that permit are semi-nomadic. I don't think they're going on some grand migration, but I think that they're moving around this Costa Maya, Belize, southern Yucatan, mid-Yucatan kind of, and, moving around and feeding. And so it kind of depends on where in that cycle you catch them on.
It's hard to predict.
Impossible to predict.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, though, when we talked about the reasons why things have been so good down here and we're seeing more fish. So just to the south of us, because we are literally on the Belizean border here, about 15 years ago, Belize implemented the mandatory catch and release for tarpon, bonefish, and permit. So it became a national law. And then about 3 years ago, the successful implementation of the gillnet ban, which is still very much a work in progress, but it's now a national law in Belize. Next step is kind of the enforcement process of that. But those types of regulations that we're seeing come to the area, it gets way back to the conversation I mentioned a few minutes ago when my fishing partner today asked me if things are actually getting better anywhere. And when you have those kinds of forward-thinking policies where people start recognizing the value of this, fly fishing resource and the value of these fish alive and swimming on the flats versus being sold on the table at a local fish market, total game changer.
Huge game changer.
And obviously you guys are seeing the effects up here because this is the same region.
It is the same fishery as far as the fish are concerned.
Sometimes the same fish.
Exactly. I don't think that, Mexican permit makes some sort of dividing line and say, hey, we're Mexican and you guys are Belizean and, we're Xcalak permit. No, it's, the Costa Maya, the Mesoamerican reef, in my opinion, is just one fishery. So I'm talking about Honduras up to northern Yucatan. I think we're one ecosystem. And I think any positive change in any of those countries is going to affect me right here in my front yard. And I think when we make a positive change here, it's going to affect, my brothers to the south fishing down at, Guanaja for their permit down there. So collaboration in positive change is everything in the Caribbean because the Caribbean's small. The Caribbean Sea is small.
Well, I'm going to hit you with this because you brought it up a second ago, and I know this is your least favorite question as a lodge owner.
Bring
right?
Bring it on.
But I want to talk a little bit about the seasons of Xcalak, what you see throughout the course of a year. And then I want to talk about the question that every angler asks. And okay, so we get that. What's the best time to come down here? Right? Your favorite question.
That is the worst question you can ask for sure. I mean, because it's throwing a dart at a dartboard. The best time to be here is when there's 11 miles an hour of wind from the southeast and there's warm currents and the tide's +1 and the fish are happy, and so and it just doesn't go by calendar. I feel like the permit world has decided that the spring is the best time to permit fish, but I think the reason we decided that is it's a convenient time for us to leave our trout waters, and it's a nice time to get away from home and come down to the Caribbean. The spring fishing is good, but we can experience a lot of wind down here in the springtime. It's dry, which is great, so we get a lot of sun. And I think that's why another big reason people picked it as the quote-unquote high season. I mean, the best fishing on the Caribbean that I've experienced in a consistent way is in the summertime. Starting in May, June, July, and August, which is kind of I think we talked about the other day, it's sort of a funny joke that the least expensive time to go permit fishing is in the summertime.
Yeah, it's considered the low season.
The low season.
For visitor numbers and for rates.
Right.
So traditionally, it's been a little bit of a hard sell, I think, to get people down here, say, in July and August. One, because people have this perception that it's ungodly hot, which is not necessarily true.
Not true at all.
Two, everybody's up north enjoying their summer months, whether it's with family or road trips or whatever it is. So you don't get as many people headed to the saltwater. As you said a second ago, it's like, hey, we want to go when there's snow on the ground and it's icy back home. That's the time to go to the Caribbean. But it's led, I think, for years to people ignoring some of the best months of the year.
Couldn't agree more. And that's what I tell most of our really hardcore anglers when they're down here. I understand why people want to come here in the winter, in the spring, and you can get amazing days then. I mean, I promise you, if you get a nice east front in January, you're going to have great permit fishing. There's no doubt. But the most consistent weather for good permit fishing and good flats fishing is in the summertime. People don't want to come here because it's beautiful back home up north then, and I get that. But if your goal is to put your hands on a permit or a multiple permit and grand slam, and let's not forget, in the summertime, the big girls are here. The tarpon are here. I mean, summertime really is just the definition of a sleeper season in every way. It is the least expensive time to go permit fishing. Permit lodges all over the Costa Maya have 2-for-1 specials or 1,000 off specials or whatever it is. And it's almost laughable because, it's the best fishing by far.
Well, I predict that in the very near future, that's going to change. I think
For
it is
sure
because
will.
the word's out, and
Yeah.
people are starting to figure out how good it is, and the days of the 2-for-1 low season rates may be numbered. So we'll have to stay tuned on that. But I guess the message there is book sooner rather than later for your summer months.
Oh, my God.
People are going to figure it out.
Come in June. As soon as I talk to a guy that is what I would call permit sick and, has been catching the bad end of the stick for 4 or 5 years, I say, come on down in late June, early July. We'll take care of you.
Well, I'll be back in July, I can tell you that.
There you go.
I'm ready. Well, this has been great. This is a good way to start the conversation for part one, and that is it for part one of the Xcalak episode of Waypoints. In part two, we'll be diving into Jesse's angling knowledge and opinions, going even deeper on the specific subject of Xcalak permit fishing. We'll also be hearing from a handful of anglers as they wrap up a week at X Flats Lodge, talking to a number of guests about their experience and their opinions of the fishery, the area, and the overall operation. Be sure to visit yellowdogflyfishing.com to plan and research your next fishing trip, sign up for newsletters and new podcasts, and stay up to date on the latest travel news and developments. Join us for our next episode of Waypoints, and remember, life is short and no one ever regretted a life of adventure.
This has been another episode of Waypoints, the podcast of fly fishing travel and adventure angling. Waypoints is produced by Brian Gregson, with music provided by the Steep Canyon Rangers. Visit yellowdogflyfishing.com for more destination profiles, travel news, and expert advice, and be sure to join us for our next episode.